morning, everybody. You're listening to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. I'm Dan Hansen, and before I say anything else, I've got to introduce, or I'm not introducing anything. Good grief. What a big letdown that is. I was building to such brilliance, such an exciting announcement, and I've already messed it up. I want to announce that this is our 400th episode. 400 times I've started the show, and I still can't do it right. Yeah, that's what I've really just shown myself. So my whole plan is kind of thrown off. Anyway, we're not going to celebrate. We're not going to really do anything. It's kind of a letdown. I did want to announce it, and I should have had a plan. That's what I should have done. I should have gotten, some special guests. I should have gotten the famous people who listen, regularly, who listen on the podcast. I'm sure there's got to be some of them, right? They could have all checked in. Tom Cruise, Paul McCartney, Mom, the people who catch it every week, the big names out there. But I didn't think to do any of that. Didn't think about it at all. So we're going to just imagine that all of these A-listers and Mom are calling in and sending me their greetings. They're thanking me, Paul McCartney thanking me for all the knowledge that we've instilled, thanking RepcoLite, thanking Betsy, thanking Haley, thanking all of us for all this knowledge that we've instilled over the course of 400 episodes. Let's imagine that we're getting all this thanks. And think about that, 400 episodes. That's 8 years worth of stuff that we've been doing it. And when you do the math, it's pretty crazy. At about 40 minutes an episode, that's about 267 hours of stuff. I mean, good stuff. I mean, the best. It's good. It's good. We always do that. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. It's good stuff. 267 hours of good stuff. And that means, if you would think about this, if you'd listen for 8 hours a day while you were at work, just on work days, you could start an episode on March 17, this coming Monday, and you wouldn't be done listening until April 30. Think about that. 8-hour days, April 30 from March 17, you could listen. That's a lot of shows. And if you do want to catch some of them, you can go to RepcoLite.com and you'll find a show archive there. And there's also a tab right on the page where you could click that and subscribe to the podcast. And if you do that, you'll never miss another episode. I mean, who knows how many more are in the can? Maybe there's 400 more just waiting to be released. We don't know. Go check it out. Enjoy some of those past episodes. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Check it out. All right, that's enough of that. Way too much time spent on that. Let's get on to the stuff that I've got planned for today. And today's actually going to be kind of a history day on the show. I've got two particular segments that focus on some historical stuff, and I'm pretty excited about it. We're going to look at the invention of paint rollers, where they came from, which is surprisingly pretty sad. It's a sad little story. Could almost be a Hallmark movie with sad vibes. It's going to get you right in the feels. I promise you that. You're going to like it. We'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about roller covers themselves, which ones you should use in which situation. All of that is coming up. But right now, let's get to the other major historical segment that I've got for the day. And a couple of months ago, I ran into a photo online that caught my attention. And it was a wooden box. It was opened up. It was displayed on a tabletop. And in the box, at my first glance, as I just scanned over the picture, at my first glance, I saw hundreds and hundreds of gadgets and gizmos all laid out and displayed to perfection in this box. The thing looked amazing. And I wanted to go get one, and I wanted to put it on a stand in the hallway of my home. It was beautiful enough to be home decor. In my house, at least. It would have fit. It would have worked. So that picture caught my eye. But when I read about it, I was really surprised to learn the full story of this item. It was the H.O. Studley tool chest. That's really the guy's name, Studley. I mean, there's so many jokes that I could make. But time's of the essence here, so I can't dwell on the fact that Studley is a name I'm going to say over and over again without even once, besides right now referring to myself and my nickname in high school, Studley. Anyway, H.O. Studley, he made this tool chest, and it's actually one of the most incredible. That wasn't my nickname in high school. I mean, that's a ridiculous lie. I can't go further without explaining that, so I apologize for having to take a quick break to apologize. But that was completely false. Anybody who knows me, they probably switched off the radio because it was that ridiculous. Whatever the opposite of Studley, that was my nickname in high school. All right. Anyway, this H.O. Studley's tool chest, one of the most incredible feats of craftsmanship ever built. It's so intricate, so precise, so mind-blowingly beautiful that it's become legendary. So let's talk about that. Let's start with the man behind the piece, Mr. Studley himself. I wonder what his nickname in high school was. Anyway, who was H.O. Studley? Well, he was born in 1838 in Lowell, Massachusetts, and he wore a lot of different hats. He was a carpenter, a mason. Most notably, he was a piano and organ maker. But most likely before all of that, when Studley was 23, the Civil War broke out. We don't have a lot of definitive information about him during this period. It's a little bit frustrating, but it's generally thought that he served with the 15th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry. The 15th Massachusetts saw significant action. We know that much. And if Studley was indeed with them, his experience in the war would have been pretty intense. That particular unit saw a lot of different engagements throughout the war. A lot of heavy fighting, a lot of heavy casualties in that particular unit. Now, what we do know for sure is that Studley was captured and was taken prisoner during the Battle of Galveston on January 1 of 1863 in Texas. And this battle involved Union forces, including Massachusetts troops, so it does seem like he might have been in that group. They were all attempting to hold this port against the Confederate counterattack. The Union lost in that particular battle, and many soldiers, including Studley, were captured. Now, after Studley's capture, he spent time as a prisoner of war, but details, about where he was and how long he was held there are pretty scarce. He was likely paroled or exchanged later in 1863, and then he returned to Massachusetts after the war and ended up resuming civilian life. And that's when he likely began, or at least fine-tuned his skills as a carpenter and mason, and eventually as a piano maker when he joined the Poole Piano Company in Boston. Now, this is where things get interesting. Not that none of that was interesting, but here's where it gets, interesting to the story that I want to talk about. Sometime between 1890 and 1920, we don't have an exact date, but sometime in there, while he's working on pianos and all of that, he also begins to build and pour his heart into this personal project, a tool chest that's not just a toolbox, but literally a work of art. Now, if you've never seen this Studley tool chest, this H.O. Studley tool chest, I should call it that. If you haven't seen it, you need to Google it and go check it out. It's amazing. When it's closed, it's about 20 by 40 inches. It's roughly the size of a big wall cabinet. When it's opened up, it unfolds to 40 by 40, and it reveals this incredible interior. Inside this mahogany box, decked out with rosewood, with ebony, with mother-of-pearl inlays, Studley somehow fits 300 tools. 300. And we're not talking just random junk here. These are precision woodworking tools. Some of them he bought, some of them he made himself. Now, the craftsmanship of this box, this tool chest, is absolutely next level. You've got to check it out. Empty when there's nothing. Empty when there's nothing in it. 400 episodes, and that's what you got. This is what happens when you pay to be on the air. I pay to be on the air, so I'm allowed to do things like that. The chest weighs 72 pounds when empty. That's what I was trying to get at. 156 pounds when loaded. So it's a heck of a thing to move around. You need a team of people or just one really beefy guy who can do it. Either way, it wasn't just super easy to move. Studley had, I've seen pictures of him. Studley had to have help. Guarantee it. His nickname in high school probably wasn't Studley either. Anyway, he's designed this thing to hang on a wall. It opens like a book. It's got these clever little hinges, all of that. It's really cool. Every little tool in there has its own custom spot. So think hidden compartments, flip-up trays, and layers that all nest together. It's almost like this 3D puzzle thing. You push a tool in, and it clicks into place. Even now, it's 100 years old or so, or more, and the tools still click into place. It's so tight. There's absolutely no wasted space. Now, I was listening to craftsmen who've seen it in person, and it was really interesting. They're talking about how in pretty much every woodworking project, you can look at the end results, and if you're skilled enough in the craft, you can find, all the imperfections, the places where the woodworker's humanity, kind of shows through, the mistakes, the imperfections that are in everything. They're talking about how you can see those. And then they say, well, the imperfections are in almost everything, because these same people were talking about this particular tool chest, the H.O. Studley tool chest, and they were saying that you could spend, basically a lifetime looking over this tool chest that Studley built, and you wouldn't find a mistake. It's the perfection of the craft. It's that cool. And I think you're probably picking it up, but it's not just a beautifully functional piece. Everything's in the right place and all of that, and it functions really well as a tool chest. It does, and that part's beautiful, but it's also aesthetically beautiful. The inlays of ivory and mother of pearl, they scream piano maker. Clearly that was a part of this that he brought into it, a part of his skill that he brought into this. There's this Victorian flair to it when you look at it. When you see it, it really does look like a work of art. Clearly Studley was flexing a little bit and showing off all of his skills. And he didn't do this because he had all kinds of extra time on his hands. This was a statement piece. Even today with all of our modern storage solutions, pegboards, rolling cabinets, laser cut foam inserts, things like that, you'd really be hard pressed to find something as beautifully functional as what Studley created. I love that name. What Studley created by hand over a century ago. So really cool stuff. But what in the world does all of that have to do with us right now? Well, I think there are some real cool lessons in here for anybody who tackles DIY or home improvement projects, or honestly just lives in a house. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff here, and we're going to get to those after the break. And while we are on break, check out the Studley tool chest online. Just a couple of quick photos is really all you need to see what I'm talking about and how cool it is. So check that out, and we'll be right back in just a minute. Stick around. Back. You're listening to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore, and we just finished talking about H.O. Studley, a mason, a carpenter, an organ and piano maker, a guy with a crazy cool nickname. He lived between 1838 and 1925. We just finished talking about him and this magnificent work of art tool chest that he built. And I'm not just throwing that phrase around lightly, work of art tool chest. Studley's tool chest spends time in the Smithsonian on exhibit because it really is an amazing achievement of skill and engineering and dedication to the woodworking craft. So check it out online. If you haven't Googled it already, Google it. The Studley tool chest. It's worth it. Check it out. Right now, let's dig a little deeper into it. I love these historical stories, these deep dives into people and events and tools and all of that. But what makes them really entertaining for me is what we can learn, I guess is the best way to say it. What lessons we can pull from these, these stories. So let's do that here. What can we as everyday people who probably don't have the skills or the crazy cool nickname of H.O. Studley, what can we learn from him and put into practice right now? Well, here's one. Quality over quantity. Studley passed away 100 years ago or so, just over that. And yet the tools in that tool chest, would still be considered high quality, remarkable pieces today, even after a century. Now, I used to buy cheap tools all the time, and I broke them, all the time. They just didn't hold up. But over the years, I've kind of changed my philosophy. As I've matured, I've become wiser. I've started investing in higher quality tools. And they're not only just lasting longer, which is great, they're also performing better, which is even more important to me. And that's something that can be difficult to wrap your brain around if you're new to buying tools. A hammer's a hammer, right? Well, no, it's not. A good hammer literally does feel different in your hand. It functions differently. It lasts longer, but it also does its job better. And the same is true for pretty much everything: screwdrivers, saws, power tools, you name it. Now, if it's a tool that you're only going to use once in a while, sure, go for the budget option. But if it's something that you're going to reach for regularly, don't skimp on it. And that brings me to paint. Yeah, a lot of people assume that paint is paint, that there's no real difference between brands or quality levels. It's just liquid in a can, right? Can't be that different. But just like with tools, the difference really can be huge between different products. High quality paint doesn't just look better for longer, it's easier to work with. It applies smoother, it levels better, it spatters less, it covers and hides better. If you've hated painting projects in the past and just felt like you're not good at it and you struggled through it, there's a really good chance. Think about what paint you used. Did you use a high quality paint, or did you cheap out and buy something that might not have been the best product out there. When you use a better product, the whole process goes more smoothly. You enjoy it better. When you talk to people who like painting, and we all know those people, some of us are those people, but you definitely know that you've talked to people who just love tackling that next project. Ask them what they're using. They're going to be using higher quality paint. So a RepcoLite product, a Benjamin Moore product, it's going to make your project easier and you're going to enjoy it better. So quality matters. That's the bottom line. Whether you're talking tools, paint, furniture, whatever. It's tempting to go cheap, but investing in better materials pays off in the long run. So that's one lesson that we can learn from Mr. Studley and his tool chest. A second lesson, organization matters. If you've ever spent 20 minutes digging through a messy toolbox for a screwdriver, you know the value of organization. Studley's tool chest, it's not just about beauty, it's also about efficiency. Everything has a place, and that made him more productive. So for any home project, taking the time to organize your workspace, whether it's a garage, a kitchen, even your junk drawer, take that time and it's going to make your life so much easier. Another good lesson. Third lesson, take pride in your work and give yourself a break. Now, I love this one because it's kind of like a twofer. It's two lessons in one. Studley didn't have to make his tool chest a masterpiece, but he did. And he did that because craftsmanship and all of that really mattered to him. He was trying to make a statement piece here. And that mindset is pretty exciting. It's inspiring. It's something that it's worth embracing. Whether you're painting a room, building a deck, fixing a cabinet door, whatever you're doing a job well, even if nobody notices, it really does bring real satisfaction. And remember, here's the second part, to give yourself a break so you actually can pull all of that off. What I'm getting at here is that we live and die by schedules. We're driven to check things off of our little lists and move on. And that's not bad. That's a good thing. Procrastination isn't the goal. That's not what I'm after. But Studley's tool chest, remember, this thing took years for him to perfect. So don't let self-imposed deadlines push you to cut corners. That's where schedules and deadlines really are a little dangerous and they're counterproductive. Don't let them push you to cut corners, especially those self-imposed ones that really, they're not grounded in any real serious, reality. Sometimes time pressures are real and you have to push through. But often the stress to finish is just in our heads. True craft isn't about speed, it's about care and precision. So when you paint, do the prep work, wash the walls, sand, fill the nail holes, let the spackle dry before sanding. That is one of my biggest struggles. I just don't want to wait. Let the spackle dry. Trust me, you're going to be way happier if you do. The results will look way better if you do. Do all of that stuff right. Don't rush your second coat. Use tape if it helps you. Bottom line, take pride in your work and give yourself a break so you've got the time to take the pride in the work. All right, lesson 4, small spaces can be used efficiently. Studley fit 300 plus tools into this little cabinet that he built. And if that doesn't scream maximize your space, I really don't know what does. So if you're struggling, with a tiny laundry room, maybe a cramped kitchen, a cluttered closet, a little bathroom, Studley's tool chest proves that smart design does make any space work better. So creative solutions exist for you, whether they're through expert advice, ready-made products out there, or just thinking outside of the box. You can find these solutions. You may not achieve Studley level perfection, but there are aesthetically pleasing ways to improve any tight space. And as we talked about a couple months ago, paint alone can transform a space in a big way. The right color can make any room feel bigger instantly. So stop out at any RepcoLite paints and let us help you with that part of your project. That alone can help you get that space feeling a little bigger. All right, there's some lessons from the amazing tool chest of H.O. Studley. Go check it out. It's definitely something to dig further into. Find some pictures. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, let's look at the history of the roller cover. That's all next. Stick around. And we're back. You're listening to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And let's talk about some great inventions, life-changing inventions. I've got an invention that I want to get to, but let's talk about or think about. There's no real talking on the radio. There's no back and forth at this point. Let's think about some inventions, though, that really changed everything. The wheel, right? We wouldn't be driving places without the wheel. The printing press, the steam engine, the computer, the refrigerator, freezers, stuff like that. Where would we be without all of these things? They've really, when you think about it, they've had stunning impact on how the world functions. A few weeks ago, I talked about the invention of glass. In fact, it's funny, this particular segment that I'm going to get to right now that we're doing was supposed to take place a couple of weeks ago, and glass was going to be my introduction, just one of the inventions that I threw out in the introduction. But it was so interesting how that came about and the impact that it's had on cultures and society in general, the world. Turned it into its own segment. So go back and check out the history of glass if you want to. That's a couple weeks back. But, lots of big inventions, lots of big things that have had huge impact on the world. The electric light bulb, blah, 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 on and on. The flushing toilet, the indoor toilet. You definitely want to have a flushing toilet. If you have a toilet that doesn't flush, well, that's got to be fixed. Nobody wants that. That's an invention that will have some impact, but it's not positive impact. Anyway, all of those things are out there in the greater world. Let's look at the world of home improvement and specifically the world of DIY painting. Let's really dial it in. And when we take a close look there, I think there's one particular invention that stands out more than any other one. And if you didn't hear the open of the show, then maybe I will surprise you. I don't know. Probably not going to surprise you because I narrowed it down to the world of DIY painting. But if you heard the open, you know that I'm talking about the roller cover. The invention of the roller cover and the roller frame, the paint roller, that whole thing all in one, I think is probably the biggest, most important tool when it comes to the entire concept in the world of DIY painting. Today it's so common, we hardly give it a second thought. But when it first arrived on the scene in the 1940s, it's not that old, in the 1940s, when it first arrived, it was nothing short of revolutionary. And like many great innovations, it wasn't welcomed with open arms. In fact, a group of people, a very powerful group of people, actually stood against it and fought against it. All right, let's go back. Let's tell the whole story. Let's go back to the Dark Ages. The times before the roller cover existed, the times prior to 1940. Go back there in your mind. Think about what painting was like if you've never thought about it before. Think of all the times that you've used a roller cover to do any painting at all. Think about that and then let it sink in that there was a point, not that long ago really, when the roller cover and the roller itself didn't exist. It's not surprising. We all knew it had to be invented at some point, but it is interesting to think about what painting might have looked like at that time. Well, back then, if you wanted to paint a wall or a ceiling, you basically had one option, a brush. And I don't mean a little brush, because that would take forever. It's a massive, wide, thick brush, sometimes 5 or 6 or more inches across, 7, 8 inches across, an inch thick or more. That's the brush. That's what we're talking about. And imagine that. And you can imagine, if you've got that in your mind, you can imagine how heavy that thing must have been when it was loaded with paint. Popeye arms. The painters back then, they had to have Popeye arms. It's the only way they could have done it. And that's just the brush itself. Painting with one of those, incredible amount of work. Nowadays painting isn't terrible, right? But it's still not like it's a leisure activity. You don't get into your pajamas after your shower at night and just do a little painting, to unwind for the day. It's still work, but it's way better than it used to be. But back then, you're talking serious, grueling work, messy work, exhausting work. Imagine it. You're ready to paint your ceiling, let's say. So you grab the best ceiling paint that you can find, Benjamin Moore's premium ceiling paint. And you do that because you've listened to episode 250 of RepcoLite's 400 Home Improvement Show episodes. You listen to episode 250 and you know that the Benjamin Moore's premium ceiling paint is a dead flat, no matter what color it's been tinted to, and that it covers and hides so much better than other ceiling paints. So you grabbed that one because you were informed, and that's the one that you chose. So you get that, you pop the top on the ceiling paint, you grab your huge, enormous brush that everybody uses for their painting, and it's 8 inches across if it's an inch, and you bend down under its weight because it's so heavy, and you dip it into the can. And of course it doesn't fit, into the can. It's too big. So you wiggle it a little bit, you kind of go sideways. You figure it's an angle thing. If you mush the bristles this way, to the side and try to sneak it in, no, that doesn't work. The can flips over. So now, 2 hours later, you're back. The carpet's still wet, but the paint's been cleaned up. The paint that you spilled, that's been cleaned up because you listened to episode 376 of the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, and you knew how to handle it. So it's 2 hours later, your carpet doesn't need to be replaced, but you still need to paint. But you're smarter now, right? So you pour your paint into a tray, you fill up the brush that way. Brilliant. Perfection. Now you lift it up. Your arm wavers under the weight. You climb up your ladder and you start to move the brush towards the ceiling. But of course, the paint's going to start to drip down from the bristles a little bit because there's so much paint. There's like a half a gallon of paint in that enormous brush. So down the ladder, you go really quickly and you fix that. Then back up the ladder, and finally, you find yourself actually brushing paint onto the ceiling. It covers and hides just like I told you it would, but soon the brush is out. It's emptied out, and you need to go back and get more. So you refill the brush, you do a little more brush work, then you refill it over and over and over and over and over. All the time holding that heavy brush over your head, hundreds of times to work your way around the entire ceiling. By the time you're done, your shoulders are aching. You got Popeye arms. They feel like they're going to fall off, but they're Popeye arms. Your face and head, you're speckled with paint. It's a mess. That's kind of like what it was way back then, before the roller cover. And because of that, it wasn't something that regular folks ever really did. It was a job for professionals. Nobody did their own DIY painting. It just wasn't a thing. You hired skilled tradesmen who came in, who knew how to handle a brush, who could control all the drips and get a smooth finish. They came in and did your painting for you. And then in 1940, everything changed. Enter Norman James Breakey, a man that we know frustratingly little about, which is kind of fun because that means I can ad-lib and nobody can say that I'm exactly wrong. But I'm not going to ad-lib here. I'm going to stick to the facts as we know them. We know he was born in 1891 in Pearson, Manitoba. We also know that Breakey was living in Toronto when inspiration struck. What we don't know, and which drives me a little bit nuts, is what he was doing that sparked the inspiration. Was he painting his own house? Probably not. People really didn't do that back then. Was he watching a painter struggle with a brush? That could have been. Did he stand on a toilet seat to hang a clock in his bathroom and slip and fall? Did inspiration strike him like it struck Doc Brown, Christopher Lloyd, in Back to the Future? Because that's what he was doing. That's how he dreamed up the flux capacitor. He fell off the toilet. He hit his head while hanging up a clock. If you don't believe me, you can look that up. That's facts. All right. Sadly, with Norman Breakey, we don't know. We'll never know. What we do know is that he came up with an idea. He came up with the concept of brushing paint onto the wall with a roller of some sort. He envisioned this cylindrical core covered with a fabric material that would absorb and distribute the paint. Now, that concept worked in his head, but what he needed was some way to hold it, hold that cover while still allowing it to roll freely. And he had a second eureka moment and came up with a handle bent into the shape of a 7 for control. It was so simple, but there you go. We've got the roller cover dreamed up and the roller frame, the roller handle that holds it. It's so obvious when you see it, and yet it took all that time before it happened. And Breakey was the one who came up with this concept. Well, he took this design to Tom Hamilton, and Tom Hamilton was a fabric expert in Toronto. Now, Hamilton had no idea what Breakey was talking about rolling paint on, but he recommended, he's a salesman. He's not going to just say no and send the guy out. He's going to make a recommendation. That's how it works. He recommended a green mohair velour, the same fabric used to cover railway touring coaches. So Breakey sees that, buys a bolt of it, cuts it into strips, glues it to his prototype roller, and then sets off to test it. And the results of his tests, it's a game changer. It works. He's super excited. Walls can now be painted faster, more evenly, with less mess, and perhaps most importantly, by anyone. So Breakey sees all of this. He has completely revolutionized this industry. So he files for a patent in Canada, and it should have been the start of a great success story, but it wasn't. See, Breakey never ends up getting the credit or the fortune that he deserved for creating this. Like so many inventors, Breakey faced a problem, and it was money. It's not just inventors that struggle with money. We all have a problem called money sometimes. But inventors specifically can sometimes see things go awry because of money. Breakey needed investors to mass produce and market his roller, this whole system. But finding financial backers wasn't easy. People just didn't see the potential. They didn't see where this could go. They didn't think it was the big idea that it really was. And in the midst of that, then, something happened. An American inventor, Richard Croxton Adams, working for a major U.S. paint company, claimed that he had invented the roller the same year. Now, Adam's version was slightly different, but the concept, the whole concept itself was identical. He had something, though, that Breakey didn't, and he had financial backing. So he fought for the patent and wins. Breakey, he doesn't have the funds to battle it out in court, and he loses control of his own invention. Adams went on to manufacture and sell roller covers, and the industry took off. Now, as word spread about the new tool, a strange thing happened. I mentioned earlier that a group of people fought the roller cover. Not everybody was happy about it. Painter unions, surprisingly, saw the roller as a threat. Rather than seeing it as a time saver or something that was going to help them out, they saw it as something that cheapened their trade, that it made painting too easy, too fast. If anybody could roll paint on a wall, what was going to happen to skilled brush painters? So some unions even went so far as to ban their contractors from using rollers. Just can't do it. You can't use rollers. They refused to endorse them, and they were hoping to hold back, the tide of change. But you generally can't hold things like this back. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. And painters who embraced the roller found that they could complete jobs faster, they could take on more work. Homeowners, they were no longer intimidated by the thought of wrestling with a massive paintbrush, so they started painting their own walls, and just like that, the DIY painting boom had begun. Now, meanwhile, while all of this is happening, we got to get back to the saddest part of the whole story. While all of that is happening, Norman Breakey fades into obscurity. He passed away in 1965, a relatively poor man. The world had changed. Think about that. Completely changed. The DIY world, for sure, had changed because of his idea. And the painting professional world, because they embraced the roller cover as well. All of that changed because of his idea, and hardly anybody knows his name. So the next time you pick up a roller, take a moment of silence to appreciate the man who made it possible. A man who, despite all these obstacles that he had, revolutionized the way we paint. You gotta love these history segments. That is so much fun to see how that played out and shook out over time. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about roller covers in a little more depth. Specifically, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know so you can navigate that roller display confidently. That's all next. Stick around. And we're back. You're listening to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And last segment, we talked about the history of the paint roller. And now in this final segment, the final segment of episode 400, I want to talk about something that confuses a ton of people, choosing the right roller cover. And I really don't blame you if you've gone into the store and felt completely overwhelmed in the paint roller aisle. Don't blame you a bit. With all of the different technologies and fabrics and marketing claims that are in your face, picking the right roller cover for your paint can feel incredibly daunting. And honestly, to make it even worse, to raise the stakes, there really is a right roller cover that you should pick for certain products. And to make it even worse, there are wrong covers that you can pick that will lead to subpar results. So getting it right matters, even more than you might have thought it did. And that's exactly why buying paint from a specialty store really does help you out. At RepcoLite, paint isn't just one of the products that we carry amongst, tons and tons of other things. It's what we do day in and day out. So our team knows the ins and outs of roller covers, and they're going to make sure that you leave with the right one for your paint and for your project. So if you don't want to memorize or digest or, consume all of the information that I'm going to dish out here in the next few minutes, just stop in at RepcoLite. We'll get you the right product. But with that said, it's still good to have some info, and so we're going to spin through it. And in order to make this information on roller covers as easy as possible, I've done a couple things. I've compiled it, the segment in I've broken it into some different categories, different surfaces that you might be painting, and then a recommended cover for those surfaces and, for different paint products. So we'll look at it that way. And to help even more, I've got a guide that you can find online. Just go to RepcoLite.com, and I've got a roller cover guide right on the homepage, so you can check that out. All right, let's look at some different surfaces and different types of paint that you could be using and figure out which roller cover is going to be best for that. And let's start with cabinets, doors, trim. You're painting your kitchen cabinets. what cover would you want to use for that? It's a common project. Lots of people are doing that. And if you happen to be brushing and rolling the product on, not spraying it on, an ideal roller cover to use would be the Wooster Micro Plush roller cover. Now, these covers are woven and they're shed resistant. Now, the shed resistant is really important. You're not going to end up with linty little fibers left behind in your paint. So you want to make sure you get something that's shed resistant. The Micro Plush cover, the micro in its name, is referring to the fibers, the fiber size, the fibers that make up the cover. And it's highlighting the fact that these fibers in this particular cover are ultra fine compared to other roller cover fibers. And what that means is that they're going to leave behind way less texture as they apply the paint. It's going to give you almost a sprayed-like finish. The Wooster Micro Plush roller cover is very densely packed. All the fibers are densely packed, and that means it's going to hold less paint. So that is something you'll be dealing with. It's going to hold less paint. You'll have to be refilling it more often. The good thing is this slows down the application process and creates that ultra-smooth finish that you're looking for. These covers can be used with any paint, and they're absolutely ideal, like I said, for cabinets, doors, and trim. You can use them on walls. Every now and then somebody thinks they want that ultra-smooth finish on their walls, but the frequent dipping and refilling that's necessary usually means you're working way too hard to get the paint on your walls. It's just not worth all that extra work. Generally, what you gain in smoothness on your wall isn't worth what you lose in speed and efficiency. But again, for cabinets, doors, and trim, the Micro Plush cover, it's a great choice, no matter what paint you're using. All right, let's talk walls and ceilings. I've got a couple options that I'm going to highlight if you're painting either of those surfaces, the Wooster Pro Doozy and the Wooster Pro Doozy FTP. These are our go-to covers, really, for painting walls and ceilings. The Pro Doozy is a professional quality, all-purpose roller cover that works on drywall, plaster, smooth to lightly textured surfaces, pretty much anything, walls and ceiling-wise. It holds a good amount of paint. It's going to move fast. It's going to release the paint evenly. It's a great all-purpose roller cover. Now, the Wooster Pro Doozy FTP. Now, this is another professional quality cover, but it's making use of a slightly different technology for a very specific reason. That FTP in the name, that means for today's paint, and that really should make this whole thing pretty easy to remember. Modern paints, today's paints, high-quality products like Benjamin Moore's Aura or Regal Select, they're often thicker. They've got higher solids content. They're thicker, they dry quicker, and that means that standard roller covers might not pick up enough paint, might release it unevenly, and they might leave streaks if the flow isn't just right. Now, the controlled release in the FTP covers solves this by ensuring that the roller picks up the optimal amount of paint and distributes it evenly onto the surface. So it fixes all of the concerns that you could have when you're using modern, high solids products. So, bottom line, with the Pro Doozy line of covers, for general wall painting with lower solids paint, standard Pro Doozy covers work just fine. If you're using a premium high solids paint, go with the Pro Doozy FTP covers, but they will work for lower solids paints as well. So you're kind of safe all the way around with the FTP covers. All right, I know that's a ton of info, but to wrap it all up, to kind of summarize, for ultra smooth finishes on cabinets, doors, and trim, go with the Micro Plush covers from Wooster. For standard walls and ceilings with lower solids paints, use the Pro Doozy covers. For high-end paints on walls and ceilings, paints that have a high solids content like Regal Select or Aura, then you're going to want to upgrade to the Pro Doozy FTP covers. There's a ton more that we could say about roller covers. I know that's enough info for a Saturday morning. Choosing the right cover does make a big difference in your final result. So the next time you're at the paint store, don't just grab the cheapest roller cover. Think about your paint, think about your surface, and think about the desired finish. And also, right now, for the rest of the month, we do have a big sale on the Pro Doozy FTP covers that I talked about. These are those workhorse covers. They're ideal for modern paints, and they'll work beautifully with lower solids paints as well. You really can't go wrong with them. They're going to give you a beautiful finish, smooth application. They're shed resistant, so no roller lint in your finish. They're perfect, and right now you can grab them for as low as $3.45 each, which is a savings of up to $1.70 per cover. So that is all happening right now at all RepcoLite locations now until the end of March. All right, that's a ton of info, but I've got the full notes at RepcoLite.com. Just head there and check out the roller cover guide on the homepage. It's going to help you navigate that part of the store a little bit better. And if you're still unsure, just stop out at RepcoLite and we'll make the right recommendation. You honestly don't need to know all this stuff. We'll help, so rest easy. All right, That's all the time we've got. We're going to have to wrap this one up. If you want to catch it again, you can find it online at RepcoLite.com. Remember, your next project is way easier than you think it's going to be. Stop out at any RepcoLite Paints and let us help. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next week. I'm Dan Hansen. Thanks for listening.